This is a refugee from Darwin, yes. They, you know, it's funny, they used to spook the shit out of people in regards to running fear into them about, you know, the Japanese are coming, or the Japanese are making way for the Nazis, blah, 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 blah. We're all going to die, dig trenches, brick up the front of government buildings, you know, sandbag the shit out of everything, brick up buildings even in the south. And when push come to shove, they didn't say a fucking thing. Well, it's not they didn't say a thing. They reported some pissweak figure like there's only, you know, 1 or 2 bombs and it was no big deal, and there was only, you know, a few people, handful of people that got killed. And I don't know if they said it was 2 people or 12 people, but basically I've seen photos of it, and they may very well be in here. 80 people got killed, and there were some chronic fucking number, you know, 50-odd air raid attacks on Darwin. And I've seen photos, which will probably be just a few pages back, where they've bombed the bejesus out of buildings in Darwin. The war did actually come here. They pretty slammed the bejesus out of Darwin. I mean, they blew the shit out of good chunks of it. And in fact, I've actually been in the forward command bunker that was used in World War II in Darwin, because it's now a war museum. The government's hopes that the extent of the raids could be disguised with all their media telling bullshit figures were dashed by the arrival of refugees who told more realistic stories. So here they are, scared, but then when they actually get an attack, they fake the figures to make it look nowhere near as bad as it is, although they scared people into digging things up in Adelaide, wherever it was I showed you before, digging trenches down in Adelaide, which is in South Australia, and so far away it's just ridiculous. They, as any invaders from the north, we've still got this kind of a plan. They were hoping that if the Japs did get in here, we would get them bogged down in the desert. And once you get in the big desert in between Darwin and all the cities in the south, you will never fucking punch through. You will never get there. And that's exactly the type of war that if they did get here, we were trying to jam them into getting straggled out in the fucking desert, because their lines would be so long and it's so fucking hot, and they would keep getting bogged in the sand because there's literally sand dunes out there that they would stall in the desert, and we would probably just... We might not starve them out, because nobody has died of starvation being lost in the desert in Australia for 80 years. But there's shitloads of people that have died of thirst. They would die of thirst. And that was the plan. And even today, if there was... Just trust me, I know people in the military, and if that's possible, that will be the plan today. If somebody come from the north, if we could get them bogged down in the desert somewhere, they would be fucked. And as I said, this is exactly the picture I was talking about. Blew the shit out of it. Bricks all over the place. Burnt out roof. And, whoopsie, we might have lost a couple of ships. Oh, and also the bank. Woo! That's still standing, but the roof's gone. They try to conceal all this was classified pretty much. Oh, I got it wrong. It wasn't 80 people. It was 243 people. Yeah. I don't know how many they got at first, in the, might say here. Oh yeah, blah blah blah. First raid, second raid, and suffered another 62, so 64 raids. I was pretty close on the number. That's in February 42, that one. Yeah. We, Australia ready for the Home Guards. And he's the British, I think. Team below. And their Home Guards. Oh yeah. Selling helmets and shit. Blackout screens, like your blackout curtains, asbestos fire blankets, antiseptic, first aid books, fire extinguisher. You're not going to believe it. It's actually powder you throw on the fire. Friggin' powder. Anti-blast solution, whatever that is. Blackout paint. Yeah. ARP wardens are anxious for individual householders to supply themselves with ARP equipment. And here, you could buy it in Sydney. I don't know if it's Air Raid something or other. Plenty of people were to the Mulga, which is like I suppose it's the only outback part really in Victoria, sort of a very deserty area. It shows all the Germans there and the rich Jews and everything, and a lot of other places, some of them, or including all the Italians. Some of these people moved into these areas in the country to sort of get away from the city areas because they were worried that that would be the concentration of the bombing after seeing what happened to London. But basically, there are a whole stack of Italians and Germans that ended up in, oh fucking hell, camps. Yeah. We put them behind barbed wire to make sure that they weren't going to suddenly decide to do anything for king and country, if you know what I mean. In case they were sleeper agents, or intending to be sleeper agents, or, you know, sort of working as spies. And they had stacks of Italians and quite a few Germans in there, but they're complaining that a lot of these rich Jews and that have come out and gone into the further out areas, and it's shot the rent through the friggin' roof in December 1941 cartoon. Oh yeah. Adelaide once again, digging another trench once again, but this time not a trench. This is actually a basic air raid shelter, and this sort of shit, like if you know what you're doing, you can make similar shit for a basic fallout shelter as well. Which is, you know, to stop against radioactive particles and whatnot. But it's a similar concept, aside from the fact that you actually need to seal it up completely and sort of try and filter the air coming through or slow down the air movement or have it come through curtains or whatever. But your basic air raid stuff, you dig a trench. Of course, you can't do this with ground that's too wet. Dig a trench and you drop the logs over the top, and then you drop sandbags over the top of the logs. And that's what the kids are doing. And although there's probably no point, I gave the kids something to do and said may have been some use in the event of an air raid. And I'll tell you what, it'd be better there than standing outside. That's decent logs, so they could probably actually put a shit ton of... Shit, they are decent logs they got. They could put a shit ton of blooming... bags on top of them. 65-year-old woman, also in Adelaide, digging an air raid trench in the backyard. She's even dug in little steps into the soil. Archives officers, anything to do with document keeping, they bailed the whole lot out and sent it out. One place, fuck, while I'm on the dole, I really should go and do this. It's a hell of a drive, but take you to a place that's a heritage place that they decided deliberately to keep heaps of grain. They grew a lot of grain in this area. Got to take it all the capital. And they said, fuck that. What if the capital gets invaded? What if we get bombed? What we've got to do is keep some hidden behind our lines in case the capital is invaded or bombed or whatever. And somewhere where it's so far out in the middle of nowhere that they might bomb the grain stores near the capital right next to the flour mill, or bomb the flour mill itself, but we still have grain. And they have this massive, massive ship. I mean, the size of this thing is fucking unbelievable. It's hard to believe. It's something that you'd be able to see from satellites. You'd see it on Google Earth easily, but the size of it is just acres upon acres upon acres. I think it's around about 40 acres or more under shed roof, built in the 40s, full of grain, right up a fair bit further north of where I am. That was one of their backup food protection plans that I don't think is in here. But it's a heritage building because the whole lot is built from unmilled timber and a bloody lot of wire. And thick, heavy wire at that. Anyway. Now I'll stop this and look for a bit more. Ba, ba, ba. Beauty! This is the best part of the bloody lot. Gasifier. And bags of charcoal. We weren't using, generally speaking, we weren't using wood gasifiers because of tar possibly clogging anything. They were a little bit smarter, and they primarily used to use charcoal. And I'm told that one relative used to use coal. And I don't know how the hell that all worked, because he would have had to have some way of getting the sulfur dioxide out or suffer severe engine damage from corrosion over time. And he used to have that truck running for a very long time. These people who've written this don't really understand a great deal about gasifiers worth of two shits, to be honest. As most Australians don't. As petrol shortage increased, drivers looked for alternative sources of fuel, and one of the most popular was that known as a gas producer. Here we don't really call them gasifiers. Old people haven't heard of a gasifier, but all of them have heard of a gas producer. But nobody's ever asked them about it, except me. Charcoal was burned and gave off a gas which was enough to drive even a heavy car, such as this, for several kilometres. Now that's a reasonably wide, solid big machine, probably a V8. It was enough to drive a heavy car such as this for several kilometres. No, you could drive it friggin' ages and ages. So long as you get the charcoal, because remember at one point there they had firewood restrictions. Process was dirty and dangerous. These guys got little masks on, which ain't going to really save them from the carbon monoxide, I don't think. Don't know exactly what those masks are got as their filters, though. Process was dirty and dangerous, and many people preferred simply to put up their cars for the duration because it was just ridiculous. Yeah, use of cars for private purposes was virtually outlawed, as a ration of less than 1,000 miles a year worth of fuel made renting a car uneconomical. Taxis restricted to 40% of the original ration, forcing many cabs off the road. Now, this reduction represented 70% less petrol for taxis compared with pre-war figures. What it's talking about, the original ration. The original ration was 3,000. First we had 3,000 miles a year, then it dropped to 2,000, then dropped to 1,000, and most people just gave up on cars. Business lost 20% of its previous allocation. My great uncle, who died when I was doing plastering, not as a result of my plastering, mind you, his friend was a mechanic and used one of these for his truck, because even as a mechanic he didn't have enough fuel, couldn't get enough fuel. And yeah, wasn't terribly great as the government reserved buses in Sydney for special classes of travellers, mainly workers, and sometimes there would be half-filled buses driving off as people were jammed onto trams. Even today, with a population risen from 6.9 million to 24 million, they still made an extra half again the amount of tram trips and train trips back then than what they do today, regardless of the fact that we've got more than threefold the population. They still made 150% the amount of train and tram trips that we do now. Yeah, things are up shit creek. They jammed these. This is another one. Transport was just about at breaking point for, you know, the local populace, because some of these trams were filled to the point of people just hanging off the side of the frickin' things, barely able to hang on. The things were just about ready to break in half with the amount of people on them. It was beyond the joke, you know. It was beyond the joke, and petrol rationing made hoarding more attractive, although this practice was potentially very dangerous, especially if someone threw a cigarette in the wrong place, especially if they threw it over your back fence. Secretary of the Motor Traders Association in Sydney reported that hoarding was widespread and gave as an example the case of a man who had laid down, hidden, 200 44-gallon drums. That's 44 British gallon, which is equivalent to 55 American gallons. Same size drums that you call 55-gallon drums in the States, we call 44-gallon drums here. And I've got a few of them out there. But this guy had stashed 200 drums of petrol. Probably just for himself. Well, probably not actually just for himself, but more likely for the black market. And Melbourne police revealed a racket involving 1 million gallons worth of coupons, which wouldn't have done the rationing too good. Would have fucked up the whole rationing system. Anyway, yeah, look, newspaper, got a van, but a lot of it went back to horse and cart. Their building once jammed with trucks and vans, as addition to the paper poured from the press. In October 42, she was pretty much majority horses. And here's some women dressed as Russians, although they're not Russians, for something that was mentioned by some Russian embassy dude not very long ago. Sheepskins for Russia appeal. We gave a frickin' chronic amount of sheepskins, and I believe corned beef, and I know that America gave a hell of a lot of corned beef as well, to Russia. I think we gave corned beef, or it could have been lamb. Actually, I think it was lamb. But, yeah, the figures that we gave were so high I didn't even know we had that many fucking sheep to slaughter. And that was just the figures I saw for what they gave to the Russian military for, well, to the Russian government ultimately for their military, to keep warm in areas like Stalingrad and other such shitstorms. See if I can find exactly how many.